Alright guys and gals, in today's video we're going to do something a little different. We're going to go over some Subaru specialty tools. This is things I think will be helpful for anyone doing DIY repairs to their Subaru. This is for doing repairs that are a little more complex. These are just some specialty tools to make your life a lot easier, and some of these you have to complete the job. I'm going to try to have links in the description of this video on where you can purchase all the tools I show. May not be able to link them all in there, but pretty confident that most of these are pretty easy to get. There are some of these tools are Snap-on branded, but I will link in equivalents where you're not buying a $40–50 socket. So I have some alternatives probably from GearWrench and a few other manufacturers. So that said, we're going to get into this and go through what I think are some good tools for you to have on hand that are more specialized than a normal ratchet set, socket set, wrench set, screwdriver, etc. You know, the most common tools that most people will have on hand for automotive work. So what we're going to do is start on the lower end of the spectrum, much easier repairs, and work our way up to more complex repairs and go through the tools just in that order, from a 1 job to a 10 job on the hardness scale. Although none of these are extremely hard, but if you're not very proficient in auto repair or not very experienced hands-on, and it could be much harder for you than, say, someone like me that has more experience doing it more regularly. So starting off is the Lisle brand spill-free funnel. This thing is a lifesaver anytime you need to do a water pump replacement, radiator replacement, thermostat replacement, just doing your 30,000 mile coolant flush. Great thing to have, helps you get all the trapped air out of the cooling system, helps you get air bubbles out. Great thing about this new design is your funnel is now clear, so you can visibly sit in the car and see where your coolant level is in your funnel. Before, they had a yellow plastic that was not opaque, and Matco Tools sold a version of this. It was a Lisle rebranded as Matco in a pink red looking color. You might have seen it in some of my old videos. I had that one, but recently just got this one, basically because of the fact it's clear, and that is such a big help where you're not constantly running back and forth, checking your temperature gauge, checking the scan tool, and checking to make sure that thermostat hadn't opened, sucked all the coolant down, and you're now low, etc. So this kit now, another great thing about it, the old kit came in a cardboard box, and if you ever put this thing back in there with coolant in it, it's impossible to get all the coolant out. It would wet the cardboard, the box would fall apart. This one is now a self-contained unit. You got this nice little pop-on plastic lid, keeps all of your attachments in place. There's only 2 really that you'll need for a Subaru, but you've got an adapter for GM style. You have an extension as well that goes on the bottom to give you a little more height. There's a 45 in there if you've got a sideways radiator. You know, you can use this on any car just about. And the great thing about the spill-free funnel is this little stopper right here. After you've got everything topped up, thermostats have opened twice, fans have cycled twice, all the air is out of the system, you're done, ready to go. All you do is push this little stopper down in the middle, twist the bottom of the funnel and lift up, and you're not going to make a big mess. You're not going to have coolant everywhere, no big cleanup. Take the adapter and the holder off, and coolant will be filled to the perfect level to pop your radiator cap on there and be done. Then you can take this that your excess coolant's in, pop open your overflow, set this in the overflow, pull the stopper and top up your overflow to the correct level. Or if you're going back into the coolant jug, same deal, just pop it back in the coolant jug, pull the thing, and you're good to go. Once you're done, toss everything back in there, pop your plastic lid on, and you're good till next time. Great tool to have, pretty cheap last time. I think I got this for like 20, think it was under 25 bucks. Well worth it to have this on hand anytime you're doing anything with coolant. Next tool we're going to talk about, this is really rudimentary. This is for doing oil changes. This is a tool made by AST, and it is a Subaru oil filler funnel. Cool thing about this is, with traditional funnels, you know, they're either really small, really tall, awkward, you're trying to hold them in there. That's not too bad when you're working on an EJ series because they have the long filler for the oil cap. The problem comes when you're working on easy 30Ds, easy 36Ds, because the oil fill cap is squatty. It's right there on the aluminum timing cover. You've only got about that much room before there's a little baffle there that keeps the oil from, I'm not exactly sure it's what for. I think it's to keep junk from falling into the timing chain area when you have the oil cap off. But if you look in there, you can see there's like a little zigzag of aluminum, like teeth across. So you really can't get a traditional funnel down in there without holding the bottle. And it's aggravating to have to put the funnel down, open the oil cap, pour the oil in, hold the funnel. You got to set it back down again or pick it up, put a rag under it so it doesn't drip all over the engine. So that's where this comes into play. Another cheap tool, but great to have on hand. It's threaded. All you do is take off your oil cap. This threads right in place. Works on all Subarus as far as I know. It works on all the EZ series engines as well as the EG33 and the SVX. And every EJ series engine I have tried, because like Subaru and being Legos, every oil cap is the same as far as I know. I have not tried this on an FA, FB series engine, and I don't know if the new 2.4 turbo in the XTs is going to be different. I assume not, but yeah, this covers like 90% of everything 2011, 2012 and older. So, and like I said, it probably fits the newer stuff too. I just haven't had it on any of the F-Series engines yet. So, another great cheap tool from AST, the Subaru Oil Fill Funnel. Moving up the scale, from here, we're talking about fluid changes and maintenance. We got 3 sockets here that are just about required. Well, they are required if you have a 2003, 2004 and newer Subaru. The front differential drain plug and consequently the manual transmission drain plug. It used to be a regular Hex, I believe it was a 21 or 23 mil. It was odd. I don't think it was a 22 like the crank bolt, but it was in the low 20 mil range for that drain plug. Well, in, like I said, 2003, 2004, 5, somewhere in that region, they swapped them all to a T70 Torx bit. And as far as I know, there's 2 reasons why they did this. One, as most manufacturers are doing now, they're changing up, putting all these crazy fittings on there, so people are forced to bring the car back to the dealership instead of doing their own maintenance and service. And 2, because the lube techs were draining the front differential, thinking it was the oil pan, even though it's clearly marked, cast in the aluminum front differential housing, diff oil with an arrow pointing to the plug. But it happens. It's the same people that were draining automatic transmissions and pulling off the spin-on transmission filter thinking they were changing the engine oil. You know, it is what it is. So I've heard there's 2 reasons. 1, they want you to bring it back to the dealership. 2, they want to prevent mishaps with draining the gear oil from the manual transmission or the front diff rather than engine oil. But either way, it's not a common thing. It's not something you're going to have in any Torx set. Most of them stop at T55, T50, or T60. But definitely something you got to get. This is a snap-on version. For those that are curious, it is a snap-on STX70E. But I'm pretty sure that there is a GearWrench equivalent and probably some of the cheaper tools too. And then secondly, we've got this 1/2-inch pipe plug socket. Another really weird thing that you're not going to see in most places. It's not going to be in any sets. It's not going to be in many box stores or anywhere else that sell tools. It's kind of a specialty deal. You're going to have to get it online. And this is for draining and servicing the rear differential. You can use a 1/2-inch drive, ratchet drive, or a 1/2-inch extension. It will work just the same. You just get a little bit better engagement on the plug with the 1/2-inch pipe plug socket, because that's exactly what it's made for, and you don't have to worry about the detent on the ratchet ball or the extension getting in the way. And it seems to be a little bit looser. I've never personally rounded one out. I'm pretty sure someone has along the way rounded one out, especially after they got rusted. But yeah, that's what this is for. Just a helpful little socket that you can drain and pull the drain and fill plugs out of the rear differential a little bit easier. This also is a snap-on, as the majority of my tools are. Part number for those that are interested, it is a PPM 516A, and I will try to link a generic GearWrench or some other lower price brand for this tool in the description as well. But yeah, that's manual transmission, front and rear differential service. You need these sockets on any newer Subarus. So on the topic of maintenance and fluids, another great tool to have is a 14mm hex socket. This socket is great to have on hand anytime you're doing a coolant service, water pump, etc. Corresponds with having the Lisle spill-free funnel. The block drain to drain the coolant from the engine block. We're not talking about the petcock on the radiator. That just drains the radiator. You're still going to have coolant in your engine. So if you're doing a water pump or something, you want to go ahead and drain the block, because if not, when you pull the water pump off, you're still going to have coolant coming out, and coolant's going to continue to drip out until you get that new water pump on there. It'll get on your new gasket. You know, it's just a pain to deal with. So, or if you're flushing out the cooling system, not flushing, but want to completely replace all of the coolant or 90% of the coolant, because some will still be trapped in the heater core and a couple of the hoses, you want to pull your block drains. On the EJ series engine, you have 2 block drains. There is one on either side of the oil pan. You might only have one if you live up north and you have a block heater. One is removed and the block heater is screwed into that port. So you might want to pull your block heater. But usually on the EJ, if you pull one or the other, it drains the majority of it. You don't normally have to pull both. I like to pull both just because I want to get it as dry as I can, because most of the time I'm pulling the engine out to put it on the engine stand, and I don't want it dripping everywhere. And on the EZ series engine, if I recall correctly, the 14mm block drain is on the right side of the engine and located in the upper oil pan. The 14mm hex socket is a great thing to have on hand too if you're doing any work to your engine, because the wrist pin cover plugs are this 14mm hex as well, and those you just unscrew from the front and rear of the block to get access to reach in and pull your wrist pins out if you're splitting the case or tearing down to rebuild from the crank up. And as far as I recall from memory, that's really the only 2 places that this 14mm hex is located on Subarus, is for the coolant block drain and for removing those wrist pin access plugs. Moving up the scale, we've got a 32mm CV axle socket, and we have a 7/32 roll pin punch. Anyone that's went to change a front axle on an older Subaru from the 90s up until about 2004, 2005, you know that the front axle is retained with a roll pin. The front axle has a female end, and the front differential has a small stub shaft coming out of it. You slide the axle onto the stub shaft. There's a hole in between where a roll pin goes in to secure that axle to that stub shaft. That roll pin in there is a 7/32. The difference between a regular punch and a roll pin punch is they have a little dimpled end. I don't know if it'll be able to focus on that. I think it is. But that dimpled end there is all the difference in the world. That little dimpled end goes in the center of your roll pin and helps just guide it in so much easier, so much faster to get it in and out. You don't have to worry about destroying the roll pin, bending up the edges, scoring up anything in there. Just really handy, helps you get it started too when you're going to go put it back in. Just nice to get it aligned on that little dimple. So again, snap on roll pin punch. Part number is PPR7. I will try to find a generic to link in the description for you. But yeah, definitely got to have this when you're replacing your front axles to knock them roll pins out, or your axle's not going to come out. Second thing, just about every single Subaru I've ever worked on and messed with a CV axle nut, they've all been a 32 mil. This is not something that's going to be a common socket in a hand tool set or from Harbor Freight or Craftsman or any of those others that I'm sure plenty of you guys have in your garage or your vehicle, you know, 155 piece set, et cetera, you know, to get started. But if you're going to work on your axles, work on wheel bearing replacements, what else? That's the main ones there, wheel bearings and CV axles. If you're doing anything in the front suspension, sometimes you do have to take apart the CV axle or at least loosen it. Same with the rear suspension stuff. Sometimes that is a requirement, but definitely need to get a good 32 mil CV axle socket for those CV axle nuts. All right, now we're getting into more specialized stuff for engine work. These are crankshaft and camshaft holding tools. This is for doing timing belt services, replacing a water pump, replacing an oil pump, replacing crank seal, cam seals, head gaskets, etc. So what we have here is the crankshaft holding tool. This is a tool from Company 23. It is basically invaluable if you're working on Subarus. This is the newer model. It has the pins in place for the old school harmonic balancer with the big holes. It also has 4 holes here, and there's an aluminum ring with 4 studs that adapt onto this for the newer style balancers that have the very small holes in it. Works on both, works great. You got the hole in the middle to put your 22 mil socket in there and crack the crank bolt loose. But we have here a harmonic balancer from, I believe, an EJ22. Doesn't really matter, they're all the same. But as you see, there's 4 holes there in the crank pulley harmonic balancer. You just align the bolts on the tool, slide it in, lock it in place, hold that in, put your breaker bar on the other, and remove your crank bolt. Easy as that. This is also a great tool to have when you are doing a clutch job. If you're torquing the flywheel bolts, if you do not have the front of the engine apart, which most of the time you don't if you're doing a clutch by itself, stick this into the crank and either hold it from underneath if you pulled the transmission to do the clutch, or if you're doing it with the engine removed, which is my favorite way to do a clutch on a Subaru. It's much faster, in my opinion, to pull the engine than to pull the transmission and mess with the axles and all, but that's just my opinion. So I'll throw it into the crank pulley like so, hold it from one side, put my torque wrench on the back side of the engine, and hold the engine so it doesn't rotate as I crank down and torque the flywheel bolts or flex plate bolts. Moving on from that, we have an assortment of camshaft holding tools. I have one from Company 23 here. This one is for the NA 2.5s. This covers the EJ25D, the first dual overhead cam NA 2.5, and covers the EJ250, let's see, let me think. It covers the 251, 252, 253. It covers the EJ22E, EJ22-2, and I believe the EJ18. I can't remember the last number in the sequence for the EJ18 other than the EJ18. I know there's, I think, 2 different series of the EJ18, but I can't remember the suffix on that. But anyway, great tool to have. Again, cam seals, head jobs, anything like that. You got to get your cam pulleys off. You don't want to risk breaking them. You don't want to grab them with a pair of pliers. I've seen so many people shatter them because they're made of like a polycarbonate plastic that if you try to put a big pair of channel locks on them, you're going to break the pulley. It's just going to happen. You're going to break it, chip it, scar the teeth. If you scar the teeth, those teeth are going to start gripping into your belt and destroy your timing belt. And we know from a destroyed timing belt on a Subaru is a destroyed engine. So we got a pulley here. This is the right exhaust pulley off of an EJ 25D. They had these domed cam pulleys. So basically pop it right on there and it locks in place where you can hold your camshaft still and take your cam pulley bolt out and reinstall it, hold it, and torque it so your camshaft doesn't turn and doesn't booger up your valves or etc. from it turning. This also works, like I said, on the single overhead cam EJ 25s and 22s. They had a slightly different cam pulley. This is for the brain fart. This is the right hand bank, which of course it's the right hand bank. See the big yellow R there? All I had to do was look down. Feel like a dummy. Anyway, right bank is this plastic unit and it fits on here just the same. You might have seen it when I was doing the video on patches, when I was pulling the engine apart. No, that was on the LL Beam Forester. Didn't pull patches engine apart. It's all running together. Anyway, so that works on the single and dual overhead cam 2.5 NA pulleys. I think the EG33 has the same pulley setup. I can't remember offhand. They might have two metal ones. It's been a while since I've messed in one. Anyway, and then from there we have this holding tool. This is one that I picked up at Advanced Auto Parts. It's not a specialty one for Subaru, but it does work well for Subaru. There are a larger range of these holding tools from Company 23 and other manufacturers. For the turbo models, for the AVCS cam pulleys, there are special ones designed just for those, because if you don't, with those, you're not just going to break the pulley, you're going to break that expensive mechanism in there that shifts the timing. There's a couple small pins in there and they will shear off if you... Anyway, that's neither here nor there. There's lots of different cam pulleys for Subarus and lots of different tools. Nice to have the tool that works for the cam. Anyway, this one here is just right sized for the metal pulley that is on the left bank of the NA single overhead cam EJ 25s, 22s, and I think the EG33s, like I said before. But all you do with this, the two pins fit in on either side and lock into place and hold your cam pulley from turning so you can torque and remove your bolt just the same as the other ones do. But yeah, that's a little bit higher up the scale for timing belts and cam and crank seals, but just about impossible to do the job right without those. I mean, you can do it. I've seen people wrap old timing belts around them, grab them with a pair of channel locks. I've had to do it before, years and years ago, before I got all my specialty tools, but yeah, it's a big pain. So get the tool, do it right, no worries. Moving on from there, we have our specialty tools here. These are seal install tools. These are made by ASF Machine. These are pretty easy and cheap, affordable to get, made in USA. Great tools, love them. There are other options. You can go to your Subaru dealership and buy the factory part from them. Not all of them will sell them, but you can get them there. There are also some companies, Kentmore, Miller, and I believe OTC, that are some OE level manufacturers for tools for the factory. So these people make specialty tools for the manufacturers, and dealership techs buy them. I know I've got a ton of Miller and Kentmore tools for other seal, bushing. I mean, just crazy stuff, you know, nothing you'd ever find anywhere else to do one specific job. But anyway, moving on from that, we've got the crank seal installer tool. This is for your rear main seal on your EJ engines. It also works on the EG and EZ engines because all the cranks are the same size at the back end, basically. And moving on from there, we've got our front crank seal install tool for putting your oil seal on the oil pump body to seal oil from leaking around the front of the crankshaft. Then we've got our cam seal install tools for installing your cam seals. This one in particular is for the turbo 2.5s. They do have one as well for the NA 2.5s, slightly different on the design of the flange for pressing those seals in. You can put your seals in without these tools, but this makes your life so much easier, and it's basically foolproof. You slap them on there, put your bolt through the middle, twist them down. They're installed to the right depth. No having to beat on it, no banging, nothing like the old way of doing it. You might have seen in some of my really, really old videos. I think the EJ25D head gasket video, I put the cam seals in using a tiny little 1/4-inch extension and tapping about 1 trillion times in a circle all around that thing, getting it in there nice and even without dinging it up, tearing it up, or cutting it. So these things make your life so much easier, and like I said, they're very affordable. They're made in the USA. Can't say enough good stuff about the ASF machine tools. They're great. You can get the Kentmore, the OTC, Miller, etc., but they're going to cost you hundreds and hundreds of dollars more than the ones from ASF machine. We're going to go a little out of order here. This one's actually a pretty rudimentary tool. This is not actually the correct tool I need to be showing you, but I don't have the correct one with me right now at the time of making this video. But newer Subarus, I believe 2010 and newer, they no longer have a tensioner for the AC compressor. Well, let me back up. 2010, I think to 2014, 2015 is where this stretch belt came into play. As far as I recall, the F-Series engines all have a single serpentine belt that run the AC compressor and the alternator like the EZs have done. But the last part of the EJ 253s, they went to a stretch belt design for their AC belt. So one-time use belt, it gets the squealing, gets old, you cut it off, throw it in the trash, and you put the new one on. There is a special tool, like I said. This is the tool actually for putting GM stretch belts on for their AC. But what you do basically is this has a flange that goes up against the harmonic balancer, and you put your belt around your AC compressor, wrap it down and on this tool, and then you take a ratchet and turn your pulley, and as you pull the pulley, it stretches the belt out and slides it in the grooves to install it. Something to keep in mind for you early teens Subaru owners with an EJ 253, you will have a little bit of difficulty getting your AC belt on without the stretch belt tool. It is possible to do. I do it quite a bit. There's a trick to do it with a small pry bar, and there's also a trick doing it with a screwdriver. Not the greatest method. The tool is the way to go, but you know, if you're in a pinch, you can still get away without using the tool. So another thing, the stretch belt tool. Moving right along, this is an invaluable tool if you own a Subaru, especially if it's a turbocharged Subaru. You want to have a compression tester, a compression test set, or better yet, a cylinder leakage tester. They're pretty daggum cheap right now. This one is one I picked up at Advanced Auto Parts probably 6-7 years ago, and it has been great. I think it was like 50 bucks or less. It is an Actron brand, and it served me well. Definitely got money's worth out of it. But great for check-in if you've got any kind of issues mechanically in your engine. If you're low on power, got misfires or whatever, you want to check compression, make sure you don't have any burnt valves, make sure your rings are sealing good, make sure your head gasket's not blown out. Usually if it's blown out bad enough to affect the compression, you're in serious trouble, and you should realize that it was a head gasket failure already. But yeah, the compression tester is a great thing to have, especially a little cheap one like this. You don't have to have a $300-400 snap-on unit. Like I said, this one's like 50 bucks or less, but great to have on hand. The cylinder leakage test I have that you've seen in several other videos on the Forester LL Bean and the Outback yellow bean, and I can't remember if I showed it on any other video checking cylinder leakage, but another invaluable tool to have. The one I have is an OTC, got it off Amazon. I think it was around 50 bucks, maybe 50 to 100 range. Still affordable, great tool to have. Helps pinpoint exactly where your issues are. In most cases, as we saw in the Forester yellow bean video, it kind of passed, but it was also kind of my screw up because I was using that little cordless DeWalt compressor, and I don't think it quite supplied the enough air as my big compressor at the shop would have done, and gave me a little bit of a false reading. But anyway, the cylinder leakage tester, as you've seen in other videos, you bring the cylinder up, the individual cylinder you're testing up on top dead center, so your intake and exhaust valves are closed, pistons at top dead center, and you remove your spark plug, put the fitting in, hook up shop air to it. Usually I run it at 100 psi. It just makes it far easier to do the calculation of leakage. You have one gauge that's your supply, one gauge that is how much pressure the cylinder is holding. You want it to be 10% different or less. So if you're putting 100 in, you want to see 90 or more better. But if you see a giant drop like 100 in and 60 out or something, you got some leakage going on, and the cylinder's not sealing. So the great thing about that is, it, like I said, it helps pinpoint where your problem is. Open up the throttle body and listen to the throttle body. If you hear air rushing up through the throttle body, you have burnt, bent, or damaged intake valves. If you hear air rushing out the tailpipe, you have burnt, damaged, bent exhaust valves. If you open up your oil filler cap and you hear the air rushing out the oil filler cap, your rings aren't sealing and the air is pushing past the piston rings. If you have open up your radiator cap and if you see air bubbling in the radiator cap, you have a blown head gasket. The pressurized air is pushing out of the cylinder between the head and the block, past the bad head gasket and getting in the coolant passages and coming to the radiator. So invaluable tool to have when diagnosing any kind of major mechanical issues. So like I said, they're pretty cheap and good to have on hand. All right, cream of the crop, the final countdown, the top tier, the most valuable tool you can have on any 96 and newer vehicle, an OBD2 code reader. You have got to get one of these or visit your local parts store to get your codes read. The amount of time I've been on Facebook and had people ask in just regular forums and pages, and been in comments on my YouTube videos, and just people in passing. It goes all the same way basically. Hey blank, I have a check engine light on. What do you think it is? I don't know. No one can tell you why your check engine light is on with that amount of information. It doesn't matter how much information actually you tell them. You can tell them the car is doing this, this, and this, and my check engine light's on. Do you think that's what it is? We don't know. We don't have ESP. There's no way, to know without hooking the diagnostic tool to the car and retrieving the trouble codes. You've got to pull your codes if you're going to diagnose the car. One of these little scanners, this is an Innova. I think I got this scan tool or code reader. I think I got this 11 years ago, 12 years ago from Walmart, and I think it was like 80 bucks then. Which this is the nicer one. They had a baser model one that just gives you a code, and then you've got a book to look it up in. This one actually gives you the code and the definition on screen. It also gives you a health check for your emission status. Basically, it checks all your monitors to see if all the monitors have passed or failed or completed. If they have, you get a green light. If you've got one or two that have not, you get a yellow light. If you got a check engine light, active trouble code, you get a red light. We'll give you freeze frame data, a small degree of freeze frame data, and cycle through your codes, and it'll let you erase them and turn your check engine light off. You don't need to have a $14,000 Snap-on Zeus wireless scan tool with a 4-channel oscilloscope and all the bells and whistles like I have. One of these is perfectly fine. I use one of these for years and years and years. I still have this one here. I still use it. Invaluable to have. You can get code readers now on the internet, on Amazon, for less than 20 bucks. Might not be the best in the West, might not hold up long, but you know, it's cheap and effective. All you're doing is pulling the code out. Once you have that code, you can do so much, but until you actually have what code is active, you're basically throwing darts at a board 100 feet away, blindfolded in a dark room while getting hit with baseball bats. I mean, that was the weirdest analogy I could think of, but you have no clue. There's no way to know what your problem is without pulling the data from the PCM. Just all there is to it. So, cheap little scan tool is a must. This is like the #1 if you're gonna work on your own car and it's a 96 or newer vehicle, you have got to have an OBD2 scan tool. Enough said. Well guys, that basically concludes my video on the more specialized tools that I think any DIYer that's gonna do any work to their Subaru should have. If you don't have these tools, like I said, click in the description below. I'll have links where you can find these to purchase. You don't need all these tools. You don't have to go out and buy them all right now, but now you know what to expect before getting into certain projects, what to think about having on hand before you, go start pulling apart that timing belt and water pump to replace a crank and cam seal and realize you don't have the holders to hold your pulleys in place, or you go to change your front CV axle and realize you don't have a roll pin punch to pull that axle out, or you go to service your differentials and you don't have that T70 socket to take your drain plug out. And I'm just trying to give you guys a heads up. Nice little collection of more specialized stuff. So hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.